CIPC, and to ensure that we have the integrity and sustainability of the SMME sector, both from SARS and CIPC. I just want to invite the colleagues on the line to say, let's use this session as an opportunity for an open dialogue. There is no question such as a silly question. All questions are valid, and all questions will be addressed by the panel that will be sitting here in order to make sure that you have a seamless deregistration process as possible. We appreciate your participation in this and the commitment to drive the change within the SMME ecosystem. So at this stage, allow me, ladies and gentlemen, to just invite the presenters to offer the necessary clarity and to assist you in the journey in making sure that you comply with your obligations. What I need to leave you with is that SARS is not an animal, but SARS is an organization that has been set up to make sure that you as the taxpayers contribute towards the development of the country. So it is not SARS, it is your organization. It is not an animal, it is your organization. Thank you very much. Let us all enjoy the presentations. Thank you and enjoy the webinar.
Thank you so much, Mr. Makoko, for your insightful address. I think we can all agree that it's always great to start with a clear understanding of why we are here tonight. And Mr. Makoko has done that in a meticulous manner. Thank you once again, Mr. Makoko, for that. All right, keep on sending those questions. And of course, to our YouTube viewers, you can send your questions to deregistration@sars.gov.za. Next, we are going to dive into the first session as per our agenda, and that will be the SARS portion of the session. It is my pleasure, ladies and gentlemen, to introduce Mr. Pako Pilane, a representative from SARS who will help us to understand how businesses can effectively manage their tax obligations when deregistering. All right. So Pako Paul Jr. Pilane is a service consultant or a taxpayer educator at SARS Tax-Based Broadening and Taxpayer Education Division. He holds a BCom in Economic Sciences and has qualifications in accounting, business science, international trade, and insurance. Pako teaches and works with all tax types or products at SARS. He has over 5 years of accounting experience as a team leader and has completed a Harvard Business Management Professional Skills course, focusing solely on ethics at work and digital skills. Mr. Pako, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Patu. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to tonight's webinar. I will be taking you through the SARS presentation, and then I will be focusing on everything that you need to know regarding your deregistration. Patu, thank you very much for that wonderful and warm welcome, ladies and gentlemen. I really hope that tonight's session will be very informational to you, and that all the information that you will gain here tonight will indeed help you understand better your tax obligations. So without further ado, let's get right into it. Now, before we get started, ladies and gentlemen, I'd just like to share with you the purpose of this presentation as well as our vision as South African Revenue Service. So the purpose of this presentation is merely just to provide you as our taxpayer with information that would definitely make it very easier for you to comply. So once you understand your tax obligations, I can assure you it will become very simple for you to comply. And our vision as SARS, right there it is on your screen, which is we aim to build a smart and modern tax authority with unquestionable integrity that is trusted and admired by all. And before we get started, ladies and gentlemen, let me just say this to you just so you can note it down. It's just a small disclaimer, just to let you know that the information that will be shared with you here tonight on this webinar has no binding legal effect whatsoever. And as you keep on going, whatever you hear, if maybe you hear something that is relevant to some legislation, please just know that you are more than welcome to go and consult that legislation. Thank you very much. All right, now these are the strategic objectives that we have at South African Revenue Service. We have about 9, but only for the purpose of this presentation, we will focus on those that you see on your screen, which are to provide clarity and certainty of your tax obligations as a taxpayer, and to definitely make it easy for you to comply, which is why we are having this webinar tonight. So on your screen, those are the key points that we are going to discuss during tonight's webinar. So we're going to talk about what is a deregistration, the reasons that you might have that might lead you to deregister, who can request that kind of deregistration, and then we will discuss the different common tax types that are available for you to deregister. And then we'll also highlight the importance of deregistration. We'll also look at things like your suspension of taxes versus your deregistration of taxes. And then we'll cover some of the customs and excise clients that are out there. Okay, so now let's start off with this. What is deregistration of a company or of a business? Now, deregistration is when the company just goes to CIPC and then deregisters with our Companies and Intellectual Property Commission. So once that happens, it means that your company has deregistered. Okay, seems like we're having slight issues here. If you can just give me a moment of your time, we will sort that out.
Well, Mr. Pako is still sorting out the technological issues that he's encountering. For those who just joined us now, we are still talking all things SMME deregistration process from CIPC and SARS. All right, we've already had a welcome address from Mr. Makwakwa, giving us a glimpse of what to expect throughout this webinar. We are about to get a presentation from our first session of the agenda, which is the obligations that you need to know about from the SARS side when you cease to trade as a taxpayer or as an SMME trader. All right, if you just joined us now and you have questions, please post them on the Q&A chat board, or you can send an email to deregistration@sars.gov.za. Also engage with us on all social media platforms. You can use hashtag your tax matters or hashtag SMME deregistration 2025. Once again, thank you so much for choosing to spend this moment with us. Mr. Pako.
Thank you very much for that, Patu. Ladies and gentlemen, apologies for that minor disruption. So as I was saying, the registration is when your company just goes to CIPC and deregisters with CIPC, which that means that it has no legal standing. So legally, it's no longer registered, and that means that it's not doing any business. It has no assets or liabilities in the Republic of South Africa. Now, the next step that would follow from that would be going to SARS and deregistering all the tax types that you are registered for. Because remember, one thing to note here is that even if you deregister your company with the CIPC, it doesn't necessarily mean that your tax types would be deregistered. So those will still be registered, and you will need to go to SARS and deregister those. All right, and now these are some of the reasons why you may deregister a company. So the reasons that we have for you tonight are just several reasons, but they are not exhaustive. So these are just some of the common reasons that might apply to you. So perhaps maybe some of the reasons you resonate with, just know that maybe that can be the reason why you may need to deregister your company. So some of the reasons could be due to dissolution of the company or liquidation of the company. So if that has happened in your company, then you are more than welcome to deregister those tax types that you are registered for. So the directors of a company might also elect to voluntarily deregister their company. So they will go to CIPC and then put in the notice for deregistration. and then CIPC would issue them with a confirmation of the registration, which we would need when you go to SARS and say you want to deregister your taxes. If maybe your business operations have also ceased, which means your company is no longer trading, you can also deregister your company as well. Or maybe there are no taxable activities anymore in your company, then you can definitely still deregister those tax types. And internally as SARS, we are also able to deregister your company on your behalf. So that's also another reason why a company may be deregistered. If also you might have duplicate tax reference numbers, because that is also something that happens in quite often. If it happens that you have two different tax numbers, you are more than welcome to deregister one, and then maybe leave one tax reference number remain active. So those that have formally emigrated from South Africa, that means those taxpayers that have left the Republic of South Africa, you are no longer a tax resident of our country, you should also deregister your tax number, because remember, you're no longer doing business within the Republic, you're no longer a tax resident of South Africa. So really, you don't really need to have a local tax number. And also for those, maybe you have a deceased, or you're insolvent, or you just liquidated, it's an estate, then you will need to deregister the old tax number and perhaps get a new one. Or if your company is just inactive or it's dormant and you feel like perhaps it's going to be an administrative burden for you, or it's just going to be costly for you to just keep on complying with the tax obligations because the company is dormant, so it's not doing any business, then that could be another reason why you would need to deregister. Okay, now that we've covered all those reasons, let's look at who can request the deregistration of a company or of a tax type. So it can be anybody that is a representative of an entity. It can be an individual, an executor of a deceased estate, anybody that who has been appointed to represent an entity. That person can definitely choose to deregister that company. Public office of a company, a main member of a closed corporation, a main trustee of a trust. As long as you are a representative that is registered, you're more than welcome, and you can indeed request for that deregistration. So now you might ask, what kind of tax types can I deregister at SARS? So the following are the common tax types that are available for you to deregister. You have your value-added tax, your VAT. This is something that you can deregister because often, remember, it has a threshold that you must meet in order to register. And it has two different categories that you may register under. You have your voluntary VAT registration, you have your compulsory VAT registration as well. And then the compulsory VAT registration has a threshold that you need to exceed. Now, once you exceed at 1 million rand in taxable supplies, it becomes compulsory for you to register for value-added tax. And if it's under that, it's just voluntary for you to register. But if it happens that perhaps your turnover just falls below that VAT threshold, then you are more than welcome to deregister for that value-added tax type if you so wish. And if it's something that will benefit you or your company, you are more than welcome to do so. Now, for income tax, that is your personal income tax, your company income tax number. This one is if you are an individual and then you no longer have taxable income, or you just might emigrate from South Africa, you can deregister for that income tax. Or if it's a business, that business is no longer trading, it's lying dormant, it has changed its structure, maybe there have been mergers or acquisitions, or it's just insolvent, you are more than welcome to deregister that income tax. And turnover tax as well, which is very similar to VAT as well. That one, it also have a threshold. It's a tax incentive for small businesses. We're saying the business should not have taxable supplies that exceed 1 million rand. If that happens, then you will need to deregister for turnover tax. So for small businesses that are still growing, turnover tax would be a very good incentive for you. But as your business keeps growing and then it exceeds that taxable supplies threshold, then you will need to deregister for turnover tax. Okay, now we've covered those three different tax types. Let's look at employees' taxes. These ones are very critical. For those that have companies that are growing, you might at some point maybe have employees. And then once your employees earn above a certain threshold, which annually would be 95,750, in a month would be 7,979. Once your employees earn above the threshold, that means you are liable then to register as an employer. You are liable to register for employee tax and then withhold taxes from those employees and pay them over to the revenue. Now, if that happens, and now as time goes on, maybe some of your employees or even all of your employees now earn below the threshold. That means you are no longer obligated to be registered for employees' taxes because you don't withhold any taxes from your employees. Or if your business maybe ceases its operations, it's not operating anymore, you just cease to become an employer, then you can deregister for payroll taxes. And now, when you register for payroll taxes, you might also be registered for skills development levy, which also have as a threshold. Now, the threshold for SDL, or skills development levy, is about 500,000 rands annually. So that only concerns the total payroll or the total annual remuneration of your employees. If in total you are paying more than 500,000 rand annually to your employees, then you should register for SDL. If their total annual remuneration then falls below the threshold, similarly to turnover taxes, similarly to VAT, then you can deregister for SDL. But once you deregister for payroll taxes, for employees taxes, just know that your UIF will automatically be deregistered with SARS. Now, if you still have employees, maybe even if they are earning below the threshold and you are then required to pay that UIF, you won't need to pay it over to SARS anymore. You will just go directly to the UIF office or to the Labor Department and pay it there. Okay, so that's what I have for you for payroll taxes. Now let's look at your corporate income tax, the registration, what the process entails. So the registration of your CIT or your corporate income taxes would mean that you will start to deregister with CIPC first. As I've mentioned earlier, you will need to go to CIPC because that's where everything started in the beginning. So the same process you need to follow. You will go to CIPC, deregister with them, and they will give you a notice of deregistration or just confirmation that your company has been deregistered. And then what do we need to do from there on? You will just simply book an appointment with SARS and then go to SARS and deregister those different tax types that you are registered for. Only if perhaps you don't want to do it online, but you're more than welcome, please, and we do recommend that you do it online on the SARS e-filing platform. It's much, much less hassles. Okay, now let's look at corporate income tax registration further. If perhaps you don't feel the need, or maybe you are not able to do it for yourself online on the SARS e-filing platform, and you want to follow the manual procedure, you are more than welcome to do so as well, but you will need to submit all the necessary supporting documents. You will need to submit all of those to SARS, and then once that happens, before your tax type can be deregistered, it's very important that you check your compliance status. One thing to note is that you must be 100% compliant. Nothing should be outstanding. You should not have any outstanding tax returns, no outstanding liabilities. And if that is the case, you are compliant, you can send through your application of deregistration to SARS, and then please wait until you receive that confirmation of the registration from SARS as well. If you do it online, perhaps you will get that confirmation immediately. But if you follow the manual procedure, you will need to ensure that you wait until you receive confirmation from SARS. If you have not yet received that confirmation, please proceed as normal. Proceed as normal, complying with your tax obligations, keep on submitting your tax returns and paying any liabilities that are due by you. Now, the VAT, the registration process is also very similar to all other tax types. So you will see as we go on that these different tax types have similar procedures. Now, the process for deregistering your VAT, the first one will be to check your eligibility. So you will need to assess your eligibility and determine perhaps if your taxable suppliers have fallen below the 1 million rand threshold. Let's say if perhaps you had registered on a compulsory basis. If it was compulsory for you to register for VAT, please check if your taxable suppliers have fallen below the threshold. If that is the case, then you can proceed with that the registration process, as long as they don't exceed 1 million rand threshold in any consecutive 12-month period. If that is the case, then you can indeed register for value-added taxes. You can submit your application. If it's a manual application, you will complete your VAT 123E form. E just stands for English. you will submit that form to SARS, and then that form, that's when you will stipulate that you want to cancel your VAT registration. And then on that form, complete everything as it's required to ensure that you avoid any delays. And then once that happens, you will need to also ensure that you're compliant as well. So after the submission of your deregistration process, please kindly ensure that you submit your final VAT return. As we go on, you will see that this is a similar procedure with your payroll or with your employees' taxes. Submit your final VAT return, where you will just see whether you have anything outstanding, where you will just consolidate everything regarding your VAT account. After you submit that, if you have any outstanding liabilities after that submission, please settle those liabilities. If there's anything that is due to you, I can assure you that will be paid to you. And then after submitting all of those documents, please again wait until you receive your confirmation of deregistration. If you have not yet received that, then by all means continue as normal, because failure to do so would mean that you would risk being penalized and having interest levied against your account. But to make sure that you actually prevent that, continue as normal until you receive confirmation of that deregistration. All right, now let's continue with our payroll taxes or our pay-as-you-earn. This is the deregistration. It's very similar to that of VAT. Submit your final EMP 501 reconciliation. Submit your final employer return, and on that EMP 501, that's where you will indicate that you wish to deregister for pay-as-you-earn. And of course, you will just need to provide your reasons why you want to deregister. And if you don't want to do that manually, you can do it on e-filing. Our e-filing platform is actually very user-friendly. You can just go into your Ref01 or your SARS registered details. You will navigate down to those taxes that you are registered for. You will see your VAT, your income tax will be there, your pay-as-you-earn. You just click on that pay-as-you-earn and just click on deactivate. And then it's just like that, you will be deregistered for pay-as-you-earn. But for those that just keep on insisting on doing the manual process, you will just need to make sure that you complete your EMP 123 form, which is just a form for deregistration, where you will indicate that you have indeed that you want to deregister for payroll taxes. And again, settle outstanding liabilities and wait until you receive that proof of confirmation. Okay, now for those that are registered for pay-as-you-earn as well as your SDL, maybe even UIF, of course. So the SDL also has a threshold, as I've mentioned earlier, of 500,000. If you want to deregister for that, please check your eligibility again. If your total annual remuneration is now below the threshold, which is the required 500,000 rands, that means you do qualify or you are eligible to deregister for that SDL. Then it's something you can do on e-filing as well. Remember, you are able to register for pay-as-you-earn and UIF without the SDL. So if it happens that you are still an employer, some of your employees, you still tax them, you pay over to SARS, but then your total payroll is below 500,000 rands. That means it doesn't make sense for you to be registered for SDL. You can choose to deregister for that SDL specifically and maintain your pay-as-you-earn and your UIF. So that is something you can do via our SARS e-filing platform. Just the same procedure that you would follow to register for pay-as-you-earn and any other tax type such as VAT. You do the same thing, and again, settle outstanding liabilities. I cannot stress this anymore. Settle your liabilities and wait for confirmation. Now, for those that might not know some of the reasons that may cause delays on your deregistration process, I'll just share with you some of the reasons. For CIT, your corporate income tax, for personal income tax, and for VAT. But then these reasons, obviously, they would apply to all other tax types, especially for those that want to deregister manually. They want to submit their manual documents to SARS and wait for that confirmation. It will be very important for you to make sure that if you don't attach or upload that confirmation of deregistration from CIPC, then your process obviously won't be, there will be delays on it. So that document that you receive from CIPC stating that your company with these details has been formally deregistered would really help you on your deregistration process of those tax types. So without that document, then we won't be able to confirm any deregistration of those tax types, especially your corporate income tax, because that is the first tax number that you would have, which we get automatically when we register with CIPC in the beginning. And to deregister, you follow a similar procedure. So for all other tax types, so personal income tax, those that are living in the Republic of South Africa, you want to make sure that we confirm the date when you left the Republic. So if you fail to provide proof of that document, maybe proof of passport, where it would state the date when you left the Republic, that would help you. But then if you fail to provide that, that will cause delays unnecessarily. And then for those who want to deregister for VAT, if maybe on your VAT 123E form, your application for deregistration, you don't complete it the way you're supposed to complete it. You don't put the necessary or the applicable dates there. You don't declare. The declaring just means that you just sign on the declaration at the bottom or the last page of your form. The declaration is very important. You don't declare. You don't put all the necessary details. That would cause delays in your deregistration process. So it means that whenever you want to deregister manually, go through your form before you submit it. Ensure that all the necessary sections are filled in correctly for all your tax type, including your pay as you earn. Everything needs to be filled in accurately or correctly. And for those that perhaps want to submit an email to SARS, because we do have an email channel that you can use, and then maybe you are representing an entity, you're representing an individual, but then that power of attorney letter is not included in your supporting documentations, as well as the copy of ID for that person who was appointed as a representative. That would indeed cause delays in your deregistration process. All right, now we have covered that. And I hope that at this point, you have now gained more information and you now understand your tax obligations much better. Now, why would it be important for you to deregister your company or deregister for the tax types that you are registered for? Well, I will share some of the reasons with you. And many of them, obviously, it's for your own benefit as an entity or as a director or as an individual. Remember, if you don't deregister your company, when you're maybe you are applicable to do so, you will need to keep on complying with the tax obligations. That means you will need to keep on submitting those tax returns. You will need to keep on alerting SARS of any changes of your registered details. If you have penalties, you will need to settle those penalties. Any interest, any liability that arises from your tax returns, you will need to settle those. So for those companies that want to avoid unnecessary compliance, because it can be very costly to keep on complying with the tax obligations. If it's a company, maybe you might be hiring a tax consultant, you might be hiring a bookkeeper or tax practitioner, somebody who may be assisting you in your company to submit your tax returns or maybe have to comply with your tax obligations. You will need to pay that person, and it takes time. It's time consuming, but then to avoid that unnecessary burden of compliance, it might be very important for you to deregister when you can do so. And to prevent penalties, companies that are lying dormant, they are not trading, there's no financial activity, those companies still need to submit their tax returns. Even if in your tax return, you will just put zeros, it's a zero return or a nil return, you will still be required to submit that tax return. But to prevent that from happening, because when you don't submit those tax returns, thinking, hey, my company is dormant, there's no activity, therefore I don't need to submit anything. But you will be penalized on a monthly basis. And one thing to note, it's very important, is that penalties are levied from 250 rands a month to a maximum amount of 16,000 rands. So imagine getting those penalties every month until such a time you decide to comply. But to prevent those, it's very important that you deregister. And just to simplify the financial management of your company, to keep accurate tax records, and as well as legal compliance. For something like turnover tax, it's very easy. It's a legal compliance for you to say, I want to deregister for turnover tax because I'm not even applicable. It's not applicable to me, or I don't need to be registered for turnover tax because now my taxable supply or my income or my revenue has exceeded the threshold of 1 million rand. All right, now we've covered those reasons. Let's differentiate or distinguish between suspension of tax types and the registration of tax types. Very important for those who might not know, thinking that if my tax type has been suspended, then it means I am deregistered, because it might be reinstated in the future and you might not know about it and you might stop complying with your tax obligations. So if that is the case, please ensure that you understand the difference between the two. So suspension of tax types, one keyword, temporary. So it's temporary, it's not permanent. You're temporarily suspending your taxes, you're suspending obligations from of those taxes. Now, deregistration, this one is a permanent thing. It means now you have permanently removed or deregistered for those specific tax types. This means that going forward, you won't have any tax obligations that you need to comply with. And now that is a good thing. So if it's important for you to deregister, please by all means go ahead and do so. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, so up to this far, we have covered all our inland taxes, all different tax types. There are reasons why you might want to deregister and so forth. And now we're going to cover those who are our customs and excise clients. So we also have processes that you will need to follow to deregister for customs and excise. So let's look at this further. If you want to deregister or cancel your customs and excise registration, and it's a very important step in any business to do. So this will be the process that you can follow. Of course, you will need to make sure that you pay adequate detail and that you comply with all the customs and excise regulations, because you might want to avoid things that are necessary, complications, just to make sure that it's a smooth transition. So, ladies and gentlemen, you might also have reasons why you need to deregister as a customs and excise client. And on your screen right there, those are some of the reasons why you might need to cancel your registration. Example, maybe you have ceased trade in your customs and excise goods. So if there's no more trade, your company has ceased to exist, or maybe you just lying dormant for the time being, please, as long as your business just stops trading goods that are subject to Customs and Excise Act and excise duties, just know that that could be the reason why you may need to deregister. Or maybe the business model has changed. Maybe you have restructured your company, or the operations have changed. Maybe you have merged with a different company and so forth. Those could be some of the reasons why you may need to cancel your registration with the Customs and Excise. Or maybe complying with regulations. Regulations do change from time to time. If something like that happens and then new regulations have been gazetted and you find that it's difficult for you to comply with those regulations and you just want to cancel your registration, that could be another valid reason. Now, what that process, what does it look like? What would you have to do? What is the first thing that you can do? Is it something you can do online? Is it something that you have to do manually? All right, let's look at that process right now. First of all, you will need to determine your client type code status. So if it's something that you did perhaps when you first registered, you did it online, you are linked on the registration, licensing, and our accreditation system of the Customs and Excise, then it means that you are able to cancel that registration online. So how do you go about doing that? You will log into your RLA system. RLA stands for registration, licensing, and accreditation. You will log into your e-filing portal. We just scroll to or click on customs and go to your RLA system. Just go to that appropriate section, and then all the client types and codes that you have, you just withdraw them or cancel them. And all the instructions on your screen, you just follow those to make sure that you complete your cancellation process. Again, for those that just want to follow the manual process, it is available to you as well. But this is something that you can do at your customs branch. This is not something that you would do at the SARS branch. You go to a different branch of customs. So how do you do that? You will complete that Customs and Excise deregistration document, which will be your DA 185 form. You will complete that, and on that form, you will have to tick that you want to deregister. Now, that form is available on the SARS e-filing platform, and then it can also be completed in person at that SARS branch office or that SARS customs branch. Now, after you attain that document, you complete the document, it has a checklist that is accompanying it. And then you must make sure that you go through the checklist, check everything that is applicable to you, and then submit that completed application along with all the supporting documents to the nearest customs branch office. Or you can do it online via e-filing, which will be very helpful actually in facilitating the process to move quicker. And once that application has been submitted to the customs branch office, they will just capture the information on your application details, and then as a client, you will receive a case number where you can just follow up whenever you want to follow up. But then that case number just lets you know that your application has been received, and then you can use it to check the status of that application. And then once you are satisfied, and then you will be deregistered. And you might be wondering or asking yourself, how long would that take? So now something to know that there is a process that you can follow online, and then you have a manual process. So obviously and understandably so, a manual process will take more time than following the online route. So for those that want to cancel their registration online on the RLA system, is going to be quicker than those who want to do it manually. So you must ensure that all the necessary documents have been submitted when they were requested of you, so as just to avoid any delays. So as we are nearing closer to the end of the presentation, ladies and gentlemen, let me just share with you our channels of engagement. How you can engage with SARS or how you can contact SARS. We have several platforms that we have active at the moment. We have our SARS mobile app, which is user-friendly. We have the SARS e-filing, which I would please kindly advise everyone to just register for e-filing. The platform is very user-friendly, it's easy to use, and it's just going to ensure that nothing and no process is delayed. The communication with SARS is always prompt. And then we have our SARS online quiz system. Now, this is something that you can access on the SARS website by just going to www.sars.gov.za. And then once you get on the welcome page, you'll just see some tiles on your left-hand side. Scroll down to the tile that says SARS online query system. Just click on it. Just browse, look at all the possible things that you can do over there. It's very easy to use. Whatever applies to you, just click on it. Even if you don't want to do anything at the moment, just go over there, get on it, and just make sure that you get used to what it looks like, get used to all the options that are available at your disposal. And then we have the SARS USSD platform as well. This is the one that you would dial *134 *7277 hash. That 7277 on your keypad, it just spells SARS. And then our WhatsApp channel. The number is very similar to our contact center, only two digits there that are different. And then our SARS WhatsApp channel, you would dial 0800 111 7277. Just say hi, hello, later, however you want to do it, and then you would get the response. But then for the last two platforms that we have, our USSD and the WhatsApp platform, just please make sure that the cell phone that you are using is the cell phone number that is registered on your profile at SARS, because our system will just validate the cell phone number that you're engaging with against the one we have on our system. And if everything matches, no need for any password to be entered, the system will just let you go through. And ladies and gentlemen, those are the wonderful news that we have, because indeed we are going digital. And ladies and gentlemen, that brings me to the end of my presentation from SARS. I will just hand over to our colleague, Christa from CIPC, who will take you through everything you need to know regarding your deregistration at CIPC. I thank you very much for your time, and I hope that this process has been quite informative and that you have learned so much more about your tax obligations at SARS. As indeed it was said by our keynote speaker, SARS is not an animal. We are here for you. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your time and good evening.
Good evening, everybody. Pako, thank you very much for all of that. You have basically touched base already on the integration between SARS and CIPC, and I've noted from the comments that there's a lot of questions about the engagement. So everybody online tonight, thank you very much. To SARS, again, thank you very much for inviting us as CIPC as part of this process. As you have said, it's an integrated process. The one impacts on the other. So hopefully tonight will provide a little bit of clarification on deregistration, specifically with the CIPC and how it links up with SARS. Pako has beautifully indicated that. So my name is Christa Klokow. I am the Senior Manager for Companies and Closed Corporations at the CIPC. And I've been with CIPC for 19 years in different roles. I started as a compliance officer, a regulation officer, a technical advisor, and for the last 8 years, senior manager for companies and closed corporations. So I've basically worked myself up into this, and annual returns, deregistration, and reinstatements has been predominantly the biggest part of my responsibility in my career at CIPC. So I'm going to dive straight into deregistrations if the presentation can be shared, and then I'll dive into it. All right, so the scope for tonight from our side is deregistration. We're not going to touch on company registration, when to consider registering a company, what is your compliance obligations, a whole bunch of that, or even reinstatements. So I'm going to touch base specifically on the impact of annual returns. There is quite a number of questions on reinstatements. So I've already posted a notice on the delays, the bulk deregistration and the delays, as well as a link to a webinar that occurred yesterday on reinstatement specifically. So if you're interested in how to apply for reinstatement, please refer to that webinar. It's about 30 minutes long, so it's not too long. Right, so let me dive into deregistrations. All right, so my content is basically the type of deregistrations. There's about 6 types of deregistration. I'm only going to touch on the 2 main ones because those are the ones that impact on SMMEs. I'm going to touch on annual return deregistration, especially the consequences. Pako has also touched on those. Then I'm going to delve into voluntary deregistration, and then some incidental matters, how to follow us, how to find information on the CIPC, and things to watch out for. So as I stated, I have posted a link on the chat regarding the webinar. So please, on reinstatements. So I'm not going to go into details with the reinstatements, but I do have some good news on the cards in this area. You have to note that deregistrations, voluntary especially, annual return deregistration and reinstatements is what we call at CIPC legacy systems, meaning it's running off our old systems and databases, and they are up for renewal. So we have renewed our annual return deregistration system. It's fully automated. It runs based on data. It issues notifications automatically. Even our annual return reminders every month is sent out automatically through that system. So the next up is good news, but it's going to take a while. We are busy automating or developing the automated systems for voluntary deregistration as well as reinstatement. So those are on the cards.
Hi,
I cannot
Christa.
yet. Yes.
You're not sharing your presentation.
Oh, should I share? My apologies for that. Thank you so much, Patu.
Problem.
Or can you share from your side? Sorry, we didn't practice this in our practice run. Apologies to those that are online.
But you can continue in the meantime, though, with the presentation.
All right, are you going to present?
No, you can just continue with the presentation. I'll see what I can
Okay.
do in the meantime for you to display.
I really appreciate it. So sorry about that, everybody. That's one of the things that we forgot to test. All right, so as they stated, all of this are going to be online, and deregistrations and reinstatements are online. So, all right, so let me just go back to my version of it. All right, so in terms of the Companies Act, there is about 6 types of deregistrations that's provided for in terms of the Companies Act. Section 83 deals with 4 of them. It's voluntary deregistration. That's where the directors or members voluntarily apply for deregistration because the business has come to an end and it's finished up all its liabilities, make sure that all of those are sorted. Then we've got the big kahuna, the annual return deregistrations. It's one of our biggest deregistrations. We just deregistered in February just over 600,000 companies and closed corporations for non-compliance. January last year, it was 1.7 million. The year before that, there was also another 600,000. And 2 years before that, I think that was about 300,000. So deregistration on annual returns is a continuous matter. And I'm going to be quite blunt. If you are non-compliant, you are going to be deregistered. And if your business was in business, you're going to struggle with the reinstatement process. There is an extremely low prioritization of CIPC compliance obligations in South Africa. That's causing a lot of reinstatements to the process of that we receive over 1,000 reinstatement applications per day. We have added more resources onto it, but unfortunately, the available resources within CIPC is limited, and we have added as many resources as we can. So you are going to have to expect delays because of your clients' low prioritization of compliance obligations. So please, small business owners, service providers, make sure that you plan for annual returns and beneficial ownership information. It is key. There is serious consequences for this. It is final deregistration, and your client and yourself is going to get stuck, as a lot of you are at the moment, in the reinstatement process. It's a legacy system. There's lots of steps in there. So, and if one of the steps fails, your application is not going to get processed. So please note and prioritize compliance. All right, so that's the two main ones, and I've said my piece about annual returns. Then there's also, as Parker said, transfer to a foreign jurisdiction. That is where the business decided, I do more business overseas, so I want to move my registration from South Africa to a foreign country, and then I have to comply with that foreign company law. So you uproot yourself and move to another jurisdiction. That's also a type of deregistration. It doesn't happen a lot. Then there's another provision in the terms of the Companies Act, which basically says if you are inactive, meaning no trading for 7 years, CIPC can actually deregister you. We haven't implemented that yet, but we have the right. If we pick up, even though you filed annual returns and other filings, that you actually were not doing business, we can take you off the company's registry at the CIPC and cease, bring your life end of your business to an end. As the chair actually indicated, it's death and taxes. Companies are also born and companies also die, and tax in between. So that's another one. If you are alive but not breathing, we're going to pull the plug on you, or we can on 7 years. Then the other one is more for your bigger companies. It's called that section 113 to 116 of the Companies Act. That's merger and amalgamations. I'm not going to touch that. That's usually, as I said, for the big companies that want to consolidate their group of companies. Then we've got another one in terms of the Companies Act, which is section 22, which is reckless and gross trading. We can also deregister or liquidate the business if we find that the company has been recklessly trading or with gross negligence on the side of the director. So that also exists. We have done a few liquidations in terms of this one, so be aware of it. All right, so let's quickly dive into the main consequences. The main consequences for deregistrations is set in section 84 of the Companies Act. Once you are deregistered, or the word in the act that is used is dissolved. So in terms of the 1973 Act, dissolve usually refers to liquidation, not deregistration. So we call it deregistered, final deregistered, as also part of dissolution in terms of the definitions of the Act. The entity ceased to exist in law, therefore it cannot trade, it cannot do business. The directors can still be sued in their personal capacities, because that bubble over the directors that protects them, the limited liability falls away, and then exposes the directors for personal liability. It's still there. Right, so that's just the high level. If you want to have the legal consequences, it's section 84 of the Companies Act. So let's quickly dive. You can just hold it right there. I will reach that consequences in a moment. So annual return deregistrations and the consequences of it. As some of you have now been realized through your clients and yourselves, the consequences of deregistration is tough. It's really tough. So in terms of annual return non-compliance, so if you have 2 outstanding annual returns, then we can put you into deregistration in terms of this of the Companies Act. So it's all done by system. So it's not something that we go and select manual and tick, 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 the following companies must be deregistered. It's all systems that runs in the background. We can refer up to 40,000 plus companies and closed corporations for non-compliance in a month. That's the level of non-compliance that we are experiencing in the country. While you are in annual return deregistrations, right? You're still in the process of deregistration, of ending your life cycle. You can still file your annual returns. Your creditors and service providers, and SARS as well, will refer you to say, look, tick, there's a risk in here. I don't want to do business with you. I will not be able to enforce my liabilities against you or provide a service because you're ending your life cycle. And if you're dead, how am I going to recover what you owe me? So they act as a risk factor to say, please bring your compliance up to date. So if you're still non-compliant with annual returns, eventually you are finally deregistered. In terms of the new system that was released in September for annual returns, basically in 40 days, you will be finally deregistered from us putting you into the process. So you have to comply as speedily as possible. Don't wait for your compliance. So, as I said, it's an automatic referral. It's all done by system. And we use, when we trigger the annual return deregistration or even the reminders in the month the annual returns becomes due for the company, we issue SMSs and emails to all the active directors and members per the contact details on our record. Now, it does happen, and it's quite prevalent, that especially small businesses, it's not those directors' contact details on our registry. Now, that's non-compliance in terms of the Companies Act itself, because directors are required to ensure that CIPC has got the correct contact details of directors and members at all times. So if we don't have your correct contact details or we got your service provider, you're not going to receive your notification. And because that is the official information that you provided to the CIPC, it's no excuse to say, oh, sorry, I have not complied because I didn't get notice. Sorry, you were supposed to update the CIPC in the first instance. Just because you did not know doesn't mean that you can bypass these obligations. So please make sure, even if you're an AR deregistration, you can still update your contact details. Please do so via a call 39 or a CK2. It's imperative that we've got your contact details. As I stated, we refer 40,000 companies and CCs at a time for non-compliance. We can't post them at that rate, so we all do through electronic communications. So what's the consequences? While you are in deregistration, you are still legally intact. You can still trade, but you need to bring your compliance obligations up to date. If you're still not compliant and we finally deregister you, these are some of the consequences that you can face. Remember Section 84, directors are personally liable for all the actions and non-actions undertaken by the company during their tenure, even if the final deregistration. You as the director can be held personally liable. So let's say, for example, you were finally deregistered and you owe SARS, or the business owed SARS at the time of deregistration. SARS don't have to go to the company first. They can go for you directly in terms of that section of the Companies Act. So it's imperative that you understand this consequence. All right, the corporate entity legally don't exist. So if you owe money to somebody else, they can't enforce that liability, but they can enforce the liability against you as the director, like in my example. Let's say, for example, another business owes you money. You can't collect that money as the director because the legal entity, the person, the bubble, does not exist to enforce its rights anymore. It's gone. So you will not be able to collect outstanding funds while you are finally deregistered. The banks will freeze your bank account. Please note, they do it. They may take some time after final deregistration, but the bank will freeze your bank account. You will not be able to access your funds in that bank account in the name of your entity. There are people that has got serious money in the bank accounts, they can't access it. And as I stated, reinstatement is currently a very tedious and long process because it's a legacy system that has not been automated yet. And you're going to be caught up with this thousands of applications that are pending into the system. Reinstatement is not going to happen overnight. All right, service providers may stop doing business with you and creditors may refuse to pay you. All right, so please comply, and if your business has stopped doing business, apply for reinstatement. Your business has stopped doing business, apply for voluntary deregistration that we'll get to in a moment. Right, so next slide. So let's say, for example, can you just go on to slide number 11, how to rectify if you're on AR deregistration. So now you are in trouble. Okay, this is the wrong presentation. I will, apologies to the listeners in this. I did send through the updated presentation, but it seems like with the confusion, my sincere apologies for that. Yes, so we'll send through the right one afterwards. So I'll take you verbatim through. All right, so how to rectify if you're on AR deregistration. You need to comply with your outstanding obligations. As I stated, within the new AR deregistration system, you've got 40 business days until final deregistration. You just have 40 days. That's not time at all. And that's the provision in terms of the regulations. You had 2 years before to comply. Now we're issuing another 40 days, right? So you had more than a sufficient time. And considering the amount of notices that we issue to you to comply, we have given due notice. So please do not ignore the communications of the CIPC. Also note a lot of our incoming volumes, and that's to the gentleman Daniel as to why our call center is struggling to get through. I'm going to be quite honest. People do not read. So when we issue these notifications, especially via email, in the content of the email, we tell you, if you want to know how to file annual returns, go here. If you want to do this, go here. The information is already in the body of the email of how to log an inquiry, how to access the information in order to comply. People do not read that, and then they send an email or a telephone call. And I actually answer some of these inquiries over weekends, like, how do I comply? Got this notice. It's in the email. You need to file and return. Here's the link. So please read those communications so that we can minimize unnecessary calls to get to those that really need assistance. All right. The easiest way for SMMEs, not intermediaries, BIS portal is designed for SMMEs. It's www.bizportal.gov.za. You log in, you go to services, annual returns, and everything is there. You can comply there. It takes you step by step, and it's got card payments immediately. All right, so I've already done this. If you have not received any of the notices that are issued in terms of the AR deregistration process or the reminders, it means your contact details are outdated. Please update urgently through the Core 39 or the CK2 processes. These are also, some of them are automated versions, some of them are hybrid, depending on the nature of the change. Go to e-services if you're an intermediary. If you are an SMME member, go to BIS portal. We try to make it as full online as possible for SMMEs to do it. We have got online validations to make sure that the customer is also the director in order to know that they're authorized to make the changes. That's why service providers cannot use BIS portal, because your customer code is not linked up to an active director status for the enterprise, and therefore you are limited to e-services. All right, let's quickly delve into voluntary deregistration. I'm going to start off with this. This is an extremely old system. It's the system that I got that was there when I started my career 19 years ago at CIPC. There is a lack of notification system built into this process, and that's why we are currently automating it. So hopefully soon we are going to have some good news and publish on our website the automation of this process. Right, so when does the voluntary deregistration occur? Right? As I said, the word voluntary gives you the indication. It is when the directors and members realize my business has come to its end of its life cycle, we're not doing business anymore, or because we have got no assets, or because of the inadequacy of our assets, there's no reasonable probability of the company being liquidated. So then you say, okay, let me take it off the registry with CIPC. So you'll do that by submitting a letter. But before you actually start putting your information through to CIPC, you need to make sure that all your liabilities has been sorted. All your tax applications are up to date. If you had employees that were registered with the UIF, you make sure that all those payments are done. If you've got a property, you make sure that there's no property inside of it, etc. So we don't want to take, because voluntary deregistration assumes that it's an empty shell, there's nothing in value of it. So you have to make sure that all those liabilities are resolved before actually applying on our system. All right, so it's advised to check that all your tax obligations and penalties has been paid with such. All other outstanding filings with other government institutions are up to date, that you've got no immovable property. We're honest when we're saying there are companies that has been deregistered for 15 years. 15 years, and then they say, oops, sorry, we forgot there was a property in it. And then they have to apply for reinstatement. And of course, you can imagine your back taxes on that immovable property. So please check with the deeds office via WinDeed whether there's any immovable property. It especially happens on generational businesses where the business got started by the father or the grandfather. By the time that the grandchild actually gets the business, they have forgotten about property that was bought by their grandfather, for example. So yeah, check for immovable property, and then also movable property, whether you've got a truck, a car, anything of those outstanding, you've that you don't have shares that you hold in another company. Make sure that all of those matters are resolved before you apply for deregistration. Remember the consequences of deregistration? The directors can be held personally liable for all these outstanding obligations. So make sure that there's none before you apply for voluntary deregistration. All right, so what is the requirements? I'm going to read this through quickly. It's easier. So first thing is a letter from the company itself. The letter must indicate the following or contain the following statement. The company or closed corporation is not carrying on business or is dormant, has no assets, or because of the inadequacy of the assets, there's no reasonable probability of it being liquidated. The request letter must be signed by 50% of the active directors or members. A third party can also apply for voluntary deregistration, but we don't necessarily process them because a third party, let's say, for example, you and a service provider are in a legal twist. This service provider said, I'm going to deregister you. They can actually apply for voluntary deregistration. The law makes provision for it. But because they cannot make the statement that the company is dormant or provide that assurance to us, CIPC don't process if it's a third party that makes the application for deregistration. It's just something that you have to note. And of course, the tax number. Since with our integration with SARS, every new company that gets registered has got a tax number, and SARS issue with a tax number. Then you need supporting evidence. You need your tax clearance certificate from SARS to confirm that most of your tax obligations is sorted with them. A certified ID copy. Certification requirements must please be adhered to. It must be dated. The dating may not be older than 3 months, for example. Must be attached of the person signing the letter, the 50% directors. And if there's a third party that's applying for it, of course, they need to prove the facts. They need to submit evidence to those statements that there was dormancy or it's not doing business. Then all of this information must please be PDF'd and then email to deregistrations@cipc.co.za as a single email. Please note that although this is a legacy system, when you email your application in, our mailboxes convert the application, if it's in PDF attachments, into an image that is then pushed through our processing systems. Also, please provide the correct enterprise registration number and name. A lot of people misspell their company names or cannot remember their correct registration number, which means we cannot possibly identify the entity in order to process. And as I stated, This is a legacy system, so there's no communication out to you to say that it failed this step at the moment. All right. If you are in annual return deregistration, you cannot really apply for voluntary if you're an annual return, although we do allow for it in certain circumstances. But now with the enhanced processing, it becomes sort of like irrelevant because the annual return deregistration system, 40 days, is far quicker than the voluntary. Okay. So how long does a voluntary deregistration take? So the step one is your application, your letter with your evidence to the deregistration. That takes approximately 4 days to process due to volumes. We also process about 1,000 voluntary deregistrations in a month. Once you are in the voluntary deregistration process, it takes about 4 months because we issue notifications to certain government entities and the directors to provide a time for objection to the voluntary deregistration. And once the 4 months has passed and we have not received an objection, then we will finally deregister. Again, this is a legacy system. It doesn't provide notification out. And it is a little bit tricky. It does sometimes the system skips the final deregistrations, and also the letters are problematic because people have to request these letters. But we'll get to the letters in a specific and a little bit later. All right, so now you're finally deregistered. How do you find out what your status is or where you are within the process? If you're finally deregistered, we'll assign the words AR final deregistered, which means the cause of the deregistration was annual returns, or final deregistered, which means it was a voluntary application. You can confirm the status on the BIS profile, which is on our BIS portal website. So for those that are SMEs, please refer to that www.bisportal.gov.za. It's specifically designed for you for fully automated services. All right. Access to the deregistration letters. And here's where the topic a little bit gets difficult to have because of the volumes of deregistrations that we're having. As you can imagine, with the amount of final deregistrations on annual returns that we've done in the past years, you can imagine the amount of requests. People don't. These final deregisters went to service providers that never informed the company. They're no longer the service provider of these companies or businesses. Or service providers, for example, to keep their records up to date on behalf of the clients will request it, but we can't really assure whether they are service providers. So the deregistration letters that SARS needs to come to finalize all the different tax types that they have is tricky at the moment. So in our newer systems, we are providing download functionalities. So if you are finally deregistered in September or referred for deregistration for annual non-compliance from September 2024, and remember you can check on BIS profile when the referral actually happened, the active directors and members can download the letters from eService and BIS portal. Service providers cannot access those letters because CIPC don't know whether you are a service provider or have a mandate from that company to do services for them. So it must be the director themselves and members. This is also a way to make sure that directors and members take responsibility for their companies. Right, so they can download. We use the ID number of the customer who logs in to link it up with a profile on the entity itself to know whether the person can be downloaded. For the first 6 months after final deregistration, it's free of charge. Thereafter, you will be charged for it. CIPC is not company, your record keeper. It's the company's responsibility. Voluntary deregistrations, you need to request it from inquiry deregistrations at CIPC. And if you're a service provider, we need your mandate. Otherwise, if it's older than 6 months or it's a third party, if you're a service provider, it goes to inquiry disclosure at CIP because you have to pay for that information, right? We provide it free of charge. The company directs itself because it's primarily their information. We give them a 6 months time to actually get their information, whereafter we'll start charging for it. All right, there's just a little post of how to download the letters and when to request it. This comes from our social media platforms. Please, if you have got a valid company or closed corporation, please follow the CIPC on any of our social media platforms that suits your needs. You'll get all of this information on a regular basis, also when we run campaigns for compliance and when we launch new products. All right, so just go into some incidental information. When you have filed annual returns, it means that you've submitted the information as well as payment. If you just made a deposit, it's not an annual return filing, and therefore your entity will be finally deregistered. So we're just noting it. Annual returns is payment with information. Okay. You should expect delays on reinstatements if you're applying. I've posted the latest notice to indicate that. And especially on also on voluntary deregistrations, because it comes from the same team, the team members help each other, and we have got seriously limited resources. Although we've added more resources as an organization, there is no more resource within CIP to help with the incoming volume. So you need to expect delays. We do apologize for it, but to be quite honest, we are picking up that there's companies that are continuously non-compliant, that has been referred 2, 3 times for final deregistration, and they still haven't learned their lesson. I'm sorry to say, I've been doing this for 19 years. Consequences of low prioritization, please prioritize. In the instance you did make a payment and you're finally deregistered and you don't want to continue with the business and you've got funds available in your customer code, you can actually request a refund of that deposit from revenue@cipc.co.za. There are requirements to it from our revenue department because we need to make sure that it was your money that you deposit in that account and that you're the owner of the account. So we need the proof of the deposits, certified ID copy, and proof of the bank statement, bank confirmation, so that we know that we're paying the things into the right bank account when you close those matters off. How to stay in the know? Please follow the CIPC on our social media platforms, as I've given some indication of some of the things that we do post in order to create messaging regarding your compliance obligations, how to do things. The launch of these automated systems will be proclaimed on those social media platforms as well. Refer to the CIPC on a regular basis, www.cipc.co.za. Check your company and closed corporation status regularly on the BIS profile. And if you have not done so, please do the CIPC online director training course. It's an online training course. It's free of charge. It takes you step by step through all the obligations that you have as a company director, how to keep your accounting records, all of those things. By knowing what to do, you will decrease your likelihood of landing up into compliance hot trouble here. So please do that. I did the course, and of course, although I've been doing this for a couple of years, I got 1 or 2 wrong, but it's very helpful. It's totally online. It's very cute, and it's got questionnaires. Right, so I'm starting to wrap up. On the next slide is just all of our social media platforms that you can follow us. LinkedIn, Twitter, YouTube. All of our presentations and webinars are posted on YouTube, X. I can't now remember what the @ is for. My apologies. All right. Also, how to stay in the know. If you're a business owner, read your welcoming letter if you've registered your company. We tell you the most important information that you have to comply with, how to contact the CIPC. We give you the registration certificate. Keep all your filing confirmations that you do with the CIPC. Even if you've asked a service provider to do it, ask them, I want proof that you've done the work and I want proof of my own company records. It is your duty as the director or the member of the company or CC to keep all your corporate information with yourself. Unless you're a company, you can ask somebody else, but there's a filing for it. All your financial records. I know this is tough for SMMEs. So you don't always know how to keep financial records. What's your income? What's your expenditures. My apologies for that. Keep all your financial records, especially if you want to go for loans from a bank. Please use that. Also, if you want to apply to CETFA and NEF, all of those funding institutions that government provide, if you're a youth member of the youth, you can use the, what's it called? Youth Development Fund. We've got all of these beautiful funds that are actually there to set up. We're also, as government, releasing a new fund for spaza shops specifically. I think the website is www.spazashop.co.za. I think it's run through CETFA and the CETFA, and you will be able to once if you're registered, you will be able to access funding in the form of vouchers that you can actually go and procure the necessary equipment that you need, and also products that you need to grow your spaza shop. So please, that fund should be released in the middle of the month. So please follow GCIS, the Government Communication Department. It will be released there as well. Then just some resources where to find all our information. On the webinars, the free online course, and how to follow us on at the CIPC. And then I would like to thank all of you. I know this took longer, and thank you very much for your patience, especially regarding the fact that we didn't present the presentation in time for you. But I hope you found this very insightful and aligned to how to split between the two and how this links up with SARS. So remember, you have to finish up your corporate entity, which is with SARS, with the CIPC, death and taxes, life and death starts with CIPC, taxes is with SARS. So it's with the two institutions. So first with us, once it's done or update with us, then you go to SARS. So thank you very much. And I'm going to hand over to my colleagues at SARS. And once again, thank you for this opportunity.
Oh, thank you so much, Christa. The @ symbol is for threats. However, thank you so much. And of course, Pako, for those detailed and practical overviews of SARS and CIPC deregistration processes. Now that we have a better understanding of how businesses can handle their tax obligations when it comes to deregistration, I'm sure that our attendees now feel more confident, about the steps that they need to take when it comes to deregistering with SARS and CIPC. To those who just joined us now, welcome. We are still talking all things SMME business deregistration process from SARS and CIPC. Not only to those who just joined us now, but I realized that a lot of people have been sending through their emails requesting for the recording of this webinar. Please note that the full recording of this webinar will be uploaded on our SARS YouTube channel. So you just go on SARS, check for SARS TV. If you're unable to locate this specific webinar, you just need to utilize the search option by using SMME business deregistration, and you will be able to find the full recording for your future viewing. Also, the presentations will be uploaded on the website at the end of this webinar. All right, I just want to say thank you to our expert respondents who are actively addressing the incoming questions on the Q&A bot. Your hands-on approach is greatly appreciated. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we are diving into the Q&A session. I hope you're excited about this one because it's your opportunity now to get answers to the questions that you've been submitting. As I've already mentioned in the beginning, that we have an exceptional panel of experts with us tonight who will be addressing or answering your questions. So I will be calling out their names, and colleagues, please just switch on your cameras when I call out your name so that the audience will be able to see you. All right, the first one, please help me to welcome back Christa from CIPC. Thank you, Christa. And Pako as well from SARS. There we go. And we have some new faces. Mr. Vickers from SARS. There we go. And we have Ayanda from SARS as well. There we go. Darlene from SARS. All right, I see you, Darlene, and we have Linda from SARS as well. Welcome, colleagues. I hope you're ready. So let's get started and see what questions our attendees have submitted. Let's dive into the first question. I believe that the main topic of this webinar is all about deregistration, rather. So a taxpayer wants to understand, what does a deregistration of a tax type mean? Mr. Vickers, can you please give a response to this one?
Good afternoon, Pako. Good afternoon, colleagues and attendees. Yes, deregistration means, if I can go back, deregistration means you already registered for a tax type. Whether it's income tax, VAT, pay as you earn, but you are registered for a tax type. And for some reason, you don't want to use this tax type anymore. Maybe you fall out of a criteria that SARS have for such a tax type, and you want to inform SARS. So that is where you formally then inform SARS about the date and the reason why you want to deregister for this tax type or product. And I can just mention, once you are deregistered for that tax type, you don't need to file those returns and you don't need to comply for that specific tax type anymore. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vickers. Great. Just a follow-up question while your mic is still on. So when should a business consider deregistering from a tax type?
Yes, I definitely think this goes hand in hand with the previous question. Once you consider to deregister for the tax type, as I mentioned, when you don't use that tax type anymore or that tax product, or maybe you don't need it, or you, as I said, you fell out of a criteria for that tax type. I think a good example will be when you are registered for VAT for several years and you filed your returns, and then for some reason, maybe you don't want to file, or you don't want to continue with your business, or maybe there's hardship, or you want to scale down, or business is not that good anymore. Then you decide not to file your tax returns because you are of the idea that I don't need that tax, let's say the VAT number anymore, so I don't need to file those returns. But unfortunately, from SARS's side, that tax type is still active. So for us, for you to be compliant, you still need to file your returns because you never formally inform us that you don't want to use this tax number. You never informed us that you do want to deregister. So that is when I would say this can cost you financial money-wise because you didn't inform us. That's why I will say, when rather, if you don't use the tax number, rather go and deregister it to avoid a scenario where you can get penalties and interest. And once you are deregistered, and maybe for future, maybe business is picking up again, you want to use your VAT number again, you can always re-register for that specific tax type instead of just leaving it. And there's several implications that might be financially to you. Thank you.
All right. That's a helpful insight, Mr. Vickers. Thank you so much for your response. All right, Ayanda. Now, let's say a taxpayer or a trader is non-compliant due to outstanding liabilities. They want to understand now, can they still deregister from a tax type under those circumstances if they have any outstanding liabilities?
Good evening, Patu. Good evening, taxpayers. Thank you very much for that question. As emphasized in both presentations, taxpayers cannot deregister tax types if they have outstanding liability. The taxpayer can verify the taxpayer needs to be compliant before deregistering any tax types. Their compliance can be verified on their e-filing profile by utilizing the My Compliance profile. They will be able to access this My Compliance profile on e-filing by selecting the following options: tax status on the top main menu, tax compliance status on the left submenu. Then they select My Compliance profile. Their compliance profile of the taxpayer will then be displayed. Then they will need to check if there's any red indicators for outstanding debt or returns. If there are red indicators, those compliance issues must be addressed first before deregistering can take place. So submit the return or pay the outstanding liability before attempting to deregister the tax type. But if on the My Compliance profile, all the indicators are green, this means that they are compliant, then they can go ahead with the deregistration process. Thank you, Patu.
Thank you, Ayanda. So I believe that compliance is key. Now, Linda,
Hundreds.
are there any criterias for deregistering from customs and excise?
Yes, if it happens that your company now ceases its operations, it could be, for example, a manufacturing warehouse, or just your registered importer-exporter, you are obliged to then consider deregistration. What will happen is that it will take 21 to 90 working days. There is some documents that will be required from you, should you be a warehouse or a manufacturer, which will be your banking details, your certified identity document, your CIPC documentation in terms of registration, your resolution indicating the reasons why you are now deregistering, your municipal account, site plan, and so forth, your contact details and revenue details. This is via the DA 185, which is that manual process. There's two processes. There's also the withdrawal process, which is available on the e-filing platform on RLA. If it's a financial institution, it has to submit 30 days before the withdrawal date. And if it's a regular importer-exporter, use the RLA platform to do your withdrawal application. Yes.
Thank you so much, Linda, for your response. Now, a taxpayer says, I have a problem with my company being deregistered. I received an email that my company has been deregistered, yet it's compliant with SARS. I believe this is from CIPC. So, Christa, can you please respond to this one? Christa?
My apologies.
Yeah,
I'm getting,
audible.
yes, I've got a bit of a lag going on and I don't understand why. So my apologies for that. All right. So as SARS and CIPC presentation has indicated, it's two different entities. Remember, think about it in the funny way. As the introduction said, it's death and taxes. Life and death is CIPC, taxes is SARS. So basically what happens is if you don't keep the two sets of compliance up to date with CIPC, which is your corporate legal entity, your formal business, and with SARS, there is going to be, the link is going to be broken. Remember, we create the life, we maintain your corporate information with the CIPC. It's not a SARS obligations. These are to collect tax on behalf of government to pay for all the services that government provides. CIPC registers and gives life and maintain the corporate entities. So therefore, your tax may have been up to date, but you may have forgotten the fact that you've got a corporate entity that you have to maintain in terms of the Companies Act with the CIPC. So if you are still, so the question is, if your tax is up to date and deregistered with the CIPC, then the question is, are you going to still do business with that legal corporate entity? If so, you have to apply for reinstatement and then continue with it. Something that I didn't mention in this in the presentation because it's a little bit legalese, but basically what happens if you finally deregister. So I use my hands quite a lot, right? So this is your date of final deregistration. Your entity ceases to exist, right? It dies. But time goes by, 5 years, and now you bring it back into life. 5 years later, the law states basically that it is as if you were never deregistered when you apply for reinstatement. So it's almost like an eraser was taken upon reinstatement, and it wipes those years of final deregistration to relive all of your obligations. So you can apply for reinstatement if your business is still up and business is active. If your business is dormant and it's not doing business at the moment, and your tax fees are up to date, good for you. Don't register a new company unless you've got a new opportunity. But if you are doing business as such, you need to apply for reinstatement. It was posted on the chat, the link to the presentation on reinstatements. Thank you. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you so much, Christa. Very interesting. I think it is imperative for taxpayers to actually understand the obligations from CIPC and SARS when it comes to the deregistration requirements and obligations. All right, Darlene, we haven't spoken. I'd like to know from you, and the taxpayer is very curious to know what happens if a business fails to deregister from PAYE on time?
Good evening, everyone. Failure to deregister on time can result in penalties and interest charges. It is important to notify SARS within 14 business days after ceasing activity. Avoid penalties and interest.
Darlene? Darlene, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay. No, thank you. Thank you for your response. You were cutting at some point. All right, Mr. Pako, welcome back. And moving on to employees' taxes, as you included on your presentation. A taxpayer now wants to understand, moving specifically to UIF and SDL, are there any implications if the business is deregistered for these tax types, UIF and SDL?
Thank you for that one. And ladies and gentlemen, good evening once again. So one thing that you would have to know is that you cannot deregister specifically for UIF. So UIF goes hand in hand with your pay-as-you-earn. Once you deregister for pay-as-you-earn, then your UIF automatically would be deregistered as well. SDL, however, there is a type that you can actually deregister individually. So the implications thereof would mean that you don't need to pay any contributions to those tax types. However, anything that was outstanding, you will need to settle those before your deregistrations. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pako. Back to you, Ayanda. You mentioned e-filing in your previous response, and a taxpayer wants to know and understand if they can deregister for VAT through e-filing.
Yes, Patu, thank you for this question. And it was quite a hot question in our chat box and the Q&A as well. So what I'm going to say applies for all tax types. So the same procedure would apply. So yes, indeed, you can deregister for VAT on e-filing. This is done on the Rev 01. The taxpayer can access the Rev 01 on their e-filing profile by selecting the following options. Organizations at the top. Then they select SARS registered details on the left submenu, then maintain SARS registered details. Then they're going to click on tax products and then select VAT and then tick on the deactivation option and then submit the Rev 01. By submitting the Rev 01, this will create a case on SARS's system for the deactivation of the VAT number. Thank you, Patu.
Thank you, Ayanda. Thank you so much. So what happens once a business has deregistered for VAT? Darlene, as mentioned by Ayanda on the previous response, it is possible to deregister for VAT using e-filing. So now a taxpayer wants to know what happens once the business has deregistered for VAT.
You will receive confirmation from the tax authority along with a fixed deregistration date, and that will be a notice of cancellation of registration with the effect date of deregistration. You must also remember, you must stop charging VAT from that date of cease, and a confirmation has been issued to you. You may need to account for VAT on stock or assets you retain at the point of deregistration if the value exceeds a specified amount.
All right. Thank you for your response, Darlene. Mr. Pako, back to you. And I think we need to switch gears a bit now. So a taxpayer is asking, how do they then handle corporate income tax liabilities if their company is liquidated?
Okay, I think that's a very important one. So if it happens that the company has been liquidated, of course, the client would have a liquidation order. Now, the first thing they will need to do would be to submit their final tax return. So from all the activities that happened in the business until the date of liquidation, they will need to submit a final tax return to account for all those activities that happened until the time of liquidation. And then they will submit that tax return to SARS and then pay any outstanding CIT liabilities. And once after that, they will then need to furnish us with that liquidation order, and then their company's income tax return, or the company income tax will be deregistered on our side.
All right, thank you, Mr. Pako. Back to you, Linda. Let's say sometime after deregistering for customs and excise, the company now has changed in terms of business operations, or they get to expand into new markets, requiring them to resume with transactions that meet the requirements for customs and excise. Now, let's say a business wants to re-register for customs and excise in the future. Taxpayer wants to understand what is the process. Can you give us a detailed process on what needs to be followed if that's the case?
It depends on the type of entity that you want to register. It can be perhaps a warehouse. If you had previously had a customs code, you can reinstate that code. You just have to put in that submission, which gives us the relevant details of who you are, where are you based, what is your business entity, and so forth, which means it would have to go through inspections and the whole process again. However, you can regain that code back and you will be able to trade as long as you are a legitimate trader. We are willing to take you, and you can continue from there on.
All right, thank you so much, Linda, for your response. Ayanda, back to you. So I believe that this is an issue that not only businesses face and also individuals also face the same issue. So a taxpayer says they are trying to deregister a PAYE under SARS register details, as you mentioned, for the process of deregistering for VAT. But the system shows an error, and the error reads as, please note that you do not have access to this function. How can this be resolved?
Thank you, Patu, for that question. So to resolve that e-filing access situation, there's 3 checks that need to be done to resolve that error message. So the taxpayer needs to ensure that they've got admin rights on their e-filing profile, and this can be verified by selecting the following options on e-filing. So they're going to select users at the top, then change details on the left submenu. Then they're going to click on update details. Then the user roles will appear. They then click on the relevant user roles to be an admin super user. These roles are manage users, manage groups, as well as manage taxpayers. So they need to ensure that all these roles are ticked. And then also another check that needs to be done under the admin rights banner is that the taxpayer needs to make sure that the user rights have been selected in manage groups in the group that they have been added in as a user on e-filing. So that is our first check. The second check is that the user must be a registered tax practitioner with an active PR number on TP configuration on e-filing. Then our last check, which is the third one, is the user must be an active registered representative of that organization. Thank you, Patu.
Thank you, Ayanda. All right, back to you, Mr. Vikas. Let's talk about bonded goods or inventory under customs control. Taxpayer would like to know, what should a business do with those items before deregistering?
Thank you, Pako. Yes, for bonded goods, as we know currently, bonded goods is where you have imported, and those goods are either in a warehouse, there's a register for those items, and now you want to deregister. So the moment you deregister or want to deregister, you have to dispose of those goods, whether you're going to pay the transfer, the customs duties and sell it locally or export. But in short, you have to get rid of those goods or demolish it, and for those goods, and then only then you will be able to deregister. You won't be able to have those things, bounded goods in any warehouse and deregister and then pay SARS later on. So in short, yes, you have to get rid of those, you either have to export it or pay your custom levies and selling it locally before you will be able to deregister formally for that custom code.
Thank you so much, Mr. Vickers, for your response. So I understand that deregistering has some direct impact on how businesses manage their inventory. So back to you, Linda. How will the deregistration affect a business ability to import and export goods?
Remember that we always want to ensure that we've got legitimate traders. So registration is very important. If you deregister, it means that you are no longer considered a trader in accordance to licensing and registration. So it will affect you. You will not be able to import and export, especially goods with a value over 50,000 more than 3 times. So it's important that you comply and you are adequately registered as either a trader, a business entity, or an individual in order to be able to facilitate any sort of trade with customs.
Thank you, Linda. So a taxpayer, I think this is a statement. It says, I am writing to request the reinstatement of the deregistration status of my company. I understand that my company was deregistered due to non-compliance with annual return filings. At the time, I was unaware of the specific requirements and procedures for filing these returns. I believe maybe the taxpayer or the attendee wanted to understand the specific requirements and procedures for filing returns before deregistering so that they do not incur any non-compliance penalties from the CIPC side. Christa, if you can assist with that. Thank you.
All right, so to be honest, there is a general rule in corporate law. Ignorance of the law is no excuse. The same with SARS. Just because you didn't know about your obligation doesn't absolve you of that obligation. So when you start a business, and that is the advice and best practice, make sure that you understand what you're letting yourself in for, what is going to be expected of you, not just from the CIPC, but tax, if it's going to be in a specific industry, what the industry requirements are. Also note that CIPC issues a lot of information, just like SARS. Your welcoming letter with your registration certificate tells you what you need to comply with. It states annual return, beneficial ownership, contact details updated with CIPC. So everything was actually provided to you upon registration. But that being said, if you are now finally deregistered, go do the online training course regarding directors that you know what you're letting yourself in for. If the business is still doing business and actually can prove that it's in business, you can apply for reinstatement. In the post of the chat, there's a link to the webinar that was done yesterday. So you can apply for reinstatement. But please make sure once you have reinstated, you update CIPC of all the outstanding from annual return, beneficial ownership. Once that is done, the correct contact details, and make sure you understand what your obligations are, not just with CIPC, but with SARS, with your industry, with all the other requirements. So you can apply for reinstatement in that instant. I hope that answers the question.
All right, thank you, Christa. A taxpayer wants to understand how should businesses handle outstanding duties and taxes before going through the deregistration process. Mr. Pako, can you please respond to this question?
Yes. Okay. So first thing, you would need to know exactly how much it is that you have outstanding. So you can generate that statement of account on e-filing. It will tell you everything that you need to know regarding your outstanding liabilities. And then at the bottom of the first page of your statement of account, you would have payment advice over there. So it would explain everything that you need to know regards to how to make your payments. We'd have the different payments method that we accept at SARS, and then you would have your payment reference number right there. So everything you need to know will be on your statement of account. So just to make things easier, please familiarize yourself with our e-filing platform.
Just another question for you, Mr. Pako. What happens if a taxpayer gets audited after PAYE deregistration?
Yes, well, unfortunately, that can happen. So we have what we call a document retention period at SARS. and we require all taxpayers to retain all forms of documents, anything that you had in correspondence with SARS. Retain those documents for a minimum period of 5 years, just in case something like this happens. So in case there is an audit, even 2 years after that correspondence or after submission of your return, that is something that indeed can happen. So make sure that you retain full records for a minimum period of 5 years. And then immediately if you receive an audit letter, just acknowledge that receipt and please promptly respond to that audit letter. Submit whatever it is that is required from you. Submit those supporting documents and make sure that you comply with everything just to avoid further penalties or further delays in your process. So just make sure that you retain your documents for 5 years, and whenever you receive an audit letter, submit everything that is required in there and make sure that everything flows smoothly.
Thank you so much, Mr. Pako. And unfortunately, due to time constraints, we are ending our Q&A session here. Thank you so much for the fantastic information panel. Thank you so much, Christa, Pako, Mr. Vickers, Ayanda, Darlene, Linda. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise. And for our attendees, we hope that you found this session insightful and you are now more confident about the deregistration process and its implications. Feel free to reach out if you have any further questions, and if your question was not answered, please be for the lookout on the frequently asked questions session on our section, rather on our website, on our SARS website, that you will get your response there. I just want to say thank you so much to our panel, the ones who are just giving us expert answers just now. It's been fantastic to have such valuable insights with us today. And as we come to the end of our session, I'd like to extend a heartfelt thank you to all our presenters, the panelists, and especially you for taking your time to engage with us this evening. Remember, if you need any further assistance or have additional questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. You can visit our website on SARS website, it's www.sars.gov.za for more resources. If you need any more webinars, you can refer to our SARS TV on YouTube, and be sure to engage with us on social media platforms. We are on X, LinkedIn, and Facebook, so you can follow us there for any updates. Also, feel free to refer to the SARS service channels for any direct support that you may need. Now, ladies and gentlemen, that concludes our today's session, and we hope that you found it very helpful and informative. Thank you once again for attending, and we look forward to seeing you at the future webinars. From me, Patichedzo Achuda, have yourself a lovely evening and take care.
Fellow South Africans, I'm addressing you this evening.
All your years of paying tax, you helped us overcome our darkest hour. You, along with every other loyal taxpayer, helped build this nation. Thank you for every life you saved and for every risk you braved, for giving our future generation a healthy start. When you saw many of our vulnerable communities, you provided for them. When you saw our healthcare workers on the front lines battling COVID, you rose to the occasion and gave them the tools to save lives. Without your tax compliance, we wouldn't be able to fight a good fight. Thank you for contributing to the important services our vulnerable communities rely on every day. To all taxpayers and traders, continue to pay your tax because it matters to millions of South Africans who depend on it. Your tax matters.